Okay, shark reproduction. Very, very interesting topic. Um, Again, we can go a lot of different ways with this discussion, but do want to kind of get into the idea of the reproductive process itself, which we're going to bring in some vocabulary, talk about some technical stuff here, but um, we learned a little bit prior in a prior discussion that there is what we call sexual dimorphism in sharks, right? So the males are going to have these claspers. So they are sort of rigid structures that are going to be used in the reproductive aspect. Again, they're not the actual reproductive organ, but they are going to be used for the internal fertilization of the female. So another aspect of shark reproduction is very aggressive. It's not polite. Sharks are not gentlemen by any means. It's a very aggressive, very rough situation. Um, the claspers will be used, forcefully inserted into the females. A lot of very aggressive biting on the female. So again, it's a rough situation for the ladies, I guess, for sharks, right? For female sharks. So once the fertilization does take place, and I'm gonna try to find a video that that relates to maybe some shark porn or something, right? That you can see the mating process in action there. But once the female has been fertilized, this is sort of unique amongst fish. The fertilization happens inside of the female's body, as opposed to like a salmon or a trout or some other catfish, amphibians, frogs. The females release the eggs outside of the body, and the sperm fertilizes them outside of the female body. We call that external fertilization. For sharks, it's internal fertilization. So the sperm meets the egg within the female body. And then we're going to get into sort of some strategies, evolutionary strategies that are being used by different species of sharks. So it's kind of like a continuum. So one we call ovipary or oviparity. And ovi refers to an ovum, an egg. So in ovipary or oviparity, the female literally will produce eggs inside of her body. And those eggs will be nourished by yolk. And the Greek word for yolk is this lecitho, right? So lecithotrophy, that is basically mom developing eggs inside of her body, and those eggs are being nourished by yolk within the egg. So feeding on yolk, that's what that literally translates to. So feeding on yolk. So we talk about trophic levels, trophic in sort of indicating consumption, eating. So lecithotrophy, the consumption of yolk, that goes with ovipary or oviparity, or being oviparous, right, to produce eggs. Going on to the other side of the spectrum, we talk about live birth, vivir in Spanish, live, to live. So viviparity or viviparous, so to produce live offspring. So humans would be viviparous. So mom basically develops the baby, and the babies are getting direct nutrition via the placenta. Now sharks don't have the placenta, they're not that evolved, but they're getting direct nutrition from mom. And this can be in different ways. It can be through fat reserves. It could be through circulatory sort of pre-placental type of anatomy. So they're literally feeding off of mom in some way, shape, or form. And we call that matrotrophy. So if you know maternal, madre, right? So pertaining to the mom, right? So feeding off of mom, basically. So being parasites on mom, basically. So the two strategies that sharks use, in different species use different strategies. So here we see an egg. This is what one type of shark egg would look like. So you see that big yolk in there. And then the little baby sort of deriving nutrition from the yolk. So this is outside of mom's body. So mom produced the egg inside, and then mom laid the egg outside. It's attached to little sticks, to coral. Sometimes they're called mermaid's purses. These are basically shark eggs, right? So this little baby, being now lecitotrophic, getting nutrition from the yolk, and mom being oviparous, laying the egg outside of her body. And again, the other strategy would be to not lay the egg where the babies would feed directly off of mom, matrotrophic, and then the babies growing a little bit more developed, and then eventually being birthed out into the world alive, so vivipary. So different strategies, yeah? Regardless of the strategy of laying eggs or having live birth, we know that there's a small number of offspring that sharks can produce. So they are not like other species that have, you know, hundreds of babies at one time. There are very few numbers of eggs that they lay, or very few numbers of offspring that they produce each cycle. So small number of offspring are retained. So if they are viviparous, they retain those babies. They're able to protect the babies, and the female can nourish the baby, right? So this bottom bullet pertaining to the vivipary strategy here. Now, here's where it gets interesting as well, because sharks take a long time to mature. Right? There's different statistics in your book. If you read there, there's one species that takes over 150 years to become sexually reproductive, right? So imagine waiting till you're 150 years old and, oh, I think I'm going to start a family, right? So that's given us an idea that they don't reproduce often, and they're not able to regenerate their population very quickly. If there is some sort of event, selection event, or drift event, something that causes loss of a big population, sharks are not able to regenerate their population very quickly. You know, some of them don't wait that long to reproduce, but they don't reproduce each year either. So let's say they're mature, they reproduce this cycle, they have a few babies this year. They typically go 2 years till they can reproduce again and again. So they're not, we don't associate sharks with being very, very sort of able to repopulate an area very easily, very quickly. So they do struggle with that repopulation aspect. Very slow reproduction events. And again, they're delicate, right? So they're top level predators, but as far as their ecology goes, they do struggle to retain babies, to have babies survive to adulthood, and then to them babies to have offspring as well. Some of these matrotrophic live-bearing babies, even within the womb, right? Even as they're waiting to be born, they're starting to consume their siblings. So natural selection, but again, even reducing further the number of offspring that are being produced. So not a lot of quick generation times for these sharks. And that's going to have a serious implication in the ecology and the conservation of these species, which we'll get into in the next discussion.